I thought it was just a family party. Laughter floated through the air, string lights twinkled over the patio, and everyone smiled like they meant it. I was sipping white wine, thinking for once maybe things were healing between us. Then Sloane, my 17-year-old daughter, grabbed my wrist hard. "Mom," she whispered, eyes sharp, "we need to leave, now." I blinked. "What? Why just trust me?" she said. "I'll explain in the car." So I smiled, made an excuse, and walked away from the party I thought was meant to bring us back together. It wasn't until we were halfway home, the car dark and silent, that she finally turned to me and said, "Mom, how did you not notice what they were planning?" And in that moment, the night shattered. The truth behind that evening wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. 3 weeks before the party, I received a cream-colored envelope with gold-embossed lettering. "The Monroes invite you to an evening of family, legacy, and celebration." Inside, the invitation spelled it out: a garden party at my parents' estate to reaffirm family unity and announce exciting plans for the future. I stared at it for a full minute, torn between disbelief and curiosity. Family unity. After everything, it had been almost 2 years since the divorce from Ryan, 2 years since I was quietly edged out of the family's wealth management firm. They said I needed space, that optics mattered, especially after the headlines about Ryan's affair. They claimed it wasn't personal, just business, just Monroe tradition. But now, here they were, asking me back into the fold. My father, Howard Monroe, and the man who once said, "You let your emotions ruin the firm," had personally signed the bottom of the invitation with a note: "You've always been part of this legacy. Elena, come home." I didn't believe it completely, but I wanted to, mostly for Sloane and Caleb, my kids, especially Caleb. He still adored Grandpa Howard. My parents spoiled him with baseball tickets, robotics kits, and talk of Monroe men carrying the torch. Sloane, though she had her mother's radar, sharp, skeptical, and quiet. I noticed how she frowned at the invitation before setting it on the counter. "You really think this is about unity?" she asked. "I think maybe it's a start." She didn't argue, just gave a small nod and said, "Okay, I'll go, but I'm wearing boots, not heels." I smiled. That was her way of saying she'd protect me, even if she didn't trust any of them. The night of the party, the Monroe estate looked like a Pinterest board had exploded across the lawn. Floating lanterns, ice sculptures, and a jazz quartet playing under a wisteria-covered pergola. Staff in black vests circulated with champagne and amuse-bouche. I wore a navy dress, nothing flashy, just simple and tailored, not trying too hard, not disappearing either. My mother, Vivian, greeted me with her signature air kiss. "Elena, darling, you look, well, well, not radiant, not elegant, just well." Sloane, in black boots and a forest green dress, stood stiff beside me as Vivian turned to her. And Sloane, "Lovely as always. You've grown into such a poised young lady." My daughter gave a polite smile but didn't answer. Then Grayson emerged from the crowd. My brother, the golden boy, dressed like a GQ cover with his hand already extended for the photographers nearby. "Elena," he said, pulling me into a side hug, "so glad you came." "Thanks for the invitation," I replied. His smile widened. "Dad's going to say a few words later. Big news coming. You'll love it." There was something performative about the way he said it, like a magician about to pull a rabbit from a hat he'd already stolen. Still, I nodded and moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces with tired smiles. I caught glimpses of Caleb laughing with Grandpa Howard near the koi pond. A server handed him sparkling cider and a flute. He looked like he belonged. I told myself that was good. Right then, as I stood near the bar, I noticed Sloane watching something intently across the lawn. Her eyes were locked on a group huddled near the fountain. My father, Grayson, and a man I didn't recognize. They were leaning close, speaking quietly. Sloane pulled out her phone. I walked over. "Everything okay?" She slipped her phone into her pocket. "Just texting a friend," but I knew that tone. It wasn't distraction. It was vigilance. "Do you want to leave?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "Not yet." That yet stuck with me. As the evening rolled on, the speeches started, toasts to legacy, slideshows of Monroe history. Grayson beamed beside my father as they announced an exciting next chapter for the family business. Something about a generational restructuring, something about asset consolidation for future security. I didn't understand all the business jargon. But when my father raised his glass and said, "To the ones who build and the ones who carry the vision forward," and looked directly at Grayson, then at Caleb, not me, I felt it. A shift, a removal, like I was a guest at my own family's succession plan. And then, just as the guests were applauding, I felt Sloane's hand slip into mine and grip tight. That's when she whispered, voice low, urgent and cold, "Mom, we need to leave. Now." I didn't move at first. My fingers tightened around Sloane's, but my heels stayed planted on the polished patio tiles. "Sloane," I whispered, confused. "What are you talking about? Are you feeling sick?" Her eyes didn't blink. "We have to go, please. Now." I looked around. My father was clapping slowly, his hand on Caleb's shoulder like he was already passing him the family crown. Grayson had his arm around Dad, grinning wide for the photographers. I forced a smile. "Okay," I said. "Let me just say goodbye and grab your brother." "No." Her grip tightened. "I'll explain in the car, but you can't tell anyone we're leaving. Just move." I had seen this look on her face once before when she spotted a stranger tailing her outside school last year, calm, locked in, but humming with alert. She wasn't being dramatic, and something was wrong. And so I did what I had never done before. With my parents or my brother, I obeyed instinct over appearance. I let Sloane pull me gently through the crowd. We cut behind the garden archway, past the marble fountain where Caleb had been moments earlier, and headed toward the side gate. I spotted Caleb at a distance, still with my father and Grayson, now laughing at something probably a Monroe family joke about tough love. "I need to get Caleb," I said. Sloane hesitated. "Just keep walking. I'll loop back and get him. If you're the one they see leaving, it'll trigger everything." "Trigger what?" But I nodded. I didn't ask again. My heels clicked quietly on the stone path as I moved toward the driveway where my car was parked. The further I got from the garden lights, the harder it was to keep my breathing steady. My hands shook when I unlocked the car, slid into the driver's seat, and waited. 3 minutes, then 5, then 7. I was about to get out and run back in when the passenger door opened. Sloane slid in, pulling Caleb by the hand. He looked sleepy and confused. "Are we going home already?" he mumbled. "Yes," I said softly. "Buckling him in, just a little early. We'll talk in the morning." The gate buzzed open as I pulled out. No one followed, not yet. 10 minutes into the drive, the silence was heavier than the air. I kept glancing sideways at Sloane. She stared out the window, jaw tight, hands clenched in her lap. Finally, I asked, "Will you please tell me what's going on?" Sloane didn't turn her head, but her voice was steady. "Mom, how did you not notice what they were planning?" My heart dropped. "What do you mean, what are they planning?" She finally looked at me. "I've been watching them for weeks, listening, reading, tonight confirmed it." "Sloane, you're scaring me." She pulled out her phone. "Do you remember Aunt Eleanor?" "Of course. She hasn't been around in years, and not since Grandpa pushed her out of the family trust after she questioned some accounting decisions. She wasn't crazy, Mom, she was right. And now they're doing it again, this time to you." I felt cold. "What exactly are you saying?" Sloane unlocked her phone and handed it to me. On the screen were screenshots, emails, a photo of a legal document, a PDF titled Asset Reallocation Agreement, Draft 3. This was on Grayson's laptop when I borrowed it last week to check a college application. She said he forgot to close a window. I blinked at the email subject lines: Elena removal, legal prep custody shift option, with Franklin's approval, Caleb heir, integration timeline. My breath caught. What is this? Sloane looked me dead in the eyes. "They're trying to cut you out completely. Mom, from the company, from the trust, from Caleb's future." "No," I whispered. "They wouldn't. They would, and they are." I pulled into the parking lot of a closed pharmacy and turned off the ignition. My hands were trembling. You need to explain everything. From the start, I said, right now. Sloan didn't hesitate. I started noticing last year. She said, when Grandpa and Grayson began inviting Caleb over more often, without inviting either of us, they'd say it was just boys' time. But then they started asking him weird things. Like if he'd rather live in a bigger house, if he liked being around successful men. I blinked. What they told him if he stayed close to them, he'd inherit the Monroe estate, that you were too emotional to run things, that you were going to burn bridges again. She swallowed hard. I didn't say anything at first. I thought maybe I was overthinking it. But when Aunt Eleanor reached out, she found me on LinkedIn. I realized this wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. My chest ached. She reached out to you, yeah. And tonight, it escalated. She pulled out a small voice recorder app. I recorded Dad, Grandpa, their whole fountain talk. You need to hear what they said about you, about Caleb, and about the trust. I sat in stunned silence, my reflection in the windshield too still to recognize. Whatever illusion of peace the party offered, it had been a carefully staged lie. And now, I knew this wasn't just about family. It was a hostile takeover. I stared at Sloane's phone, my thumb hovering above the play button on the voice recording app. My pulse pounded in my ears. Are you sure this is legal? I asked, my voice shaky. Sloane nodded. Washington's a one-party consent state, and I was in plain sight near the fountain. I didn't hide the phone. She sounded like she had researched this, like she had been preparing for weeks. I tapped the file. The audio was slightly muffled at first, the hum of the party in the background, clinking glasses. Soft jazz, but then the voices came in clear. Grayson, she still thinks this party is about healing. It's almost funny. Howard, she doesn't see the bigger picture. She never did. Too idealistic, too soft. Grayson, we'll get the trust amended. She won't know until it's done. Once Caleb's designated as heir, she's irrelevant. Howard, it's for the best. The family needs order, not sentiment. Grayson, and if she pushes back, Howard, let her. She has no legal ground. Ryan's gone. The firm is under my control, and Caleb belongs with us. My hand trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Belongs with us. As if my son were a company asset, a tool, a prize. I looked over at Caleb, asleep in the back seat, curled up with his seatbelt still on, his mouth parted slightly, one arm clutching the little glow wand he got at the party. He had no idea they were already planning to use him against me. I sat back, closing my eyes, as the weight of those words sank in. I can't believe this, I whispered. They're talking about me like I'm a threat, like I'm removable. Sloane rested a hand on my arm. It's not just you. They tried the same thing with Aunt Eleanor. Remember, she told me everything. I shook my head. I remember when she left, I thought she had snapped, that she betrayed the family. Because that's what they told you, Sloane said softly. They made sure everyone believed it. I felt sick. My whole life I had measured my worth through the Monroe lens: stability, image, structure, loyalty. All this time I believed leaving the company was my choice, that Dad was being protective, that Grayson was just ambitious. But now the truth was undeniable. They had been grooming Caleb to replace me. They even have a term for it. Sloane continued. Aunt Eleanor called it familial erasure. It's when someone in the family becomes inconvenient, so they're slowly edited out. Meetings without you, decisions made around you, photos where your name isn't mentioned. Sound familiar? I flashed back to the party slideshow. 40 years of Monroe milestones, Grayson's graduation, my parents' wedding, Caleb's birthday, but not one single photo of me in the last 5 years. Not one of me with Caleb, not one of me and Sloane. I swallowed hard. I thought that was just an oversight. Sloane shook her head. It was intentional. You were never supposed to notice. But I did. I turned to her, finally seeing her not as a teenager, but as a young woman standing between generations, one trying to erase us, the other fighting to survive. You knew this would happen tonight. I said, I suspected. She replied, but I didn't know they'd be so bold. Her voice cracked slightly. When they brought Caleb up to the front, when Grandpa said the next generation and looked right at him, I knew it. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about transition, without you. I reached for her hand. I'm sorry, I whispered, that I didn't see it, that I let you carry this alone. Sloane exhaled, tears threatening her usually composed expression. I just didn't want them to break you, too. We sat in silence for a while, parked under the flickering light of an empty pharmacy lot. Then I asked, what else did Aunt Eleanor tell you? Sloane leaned back. She said the same thing happened to her when she challenged Grandpa about the estate. He made her look unstable, told everyone she was over-emotional and unfit to manage assets. He even manipulated the legal paperwork while she was grieving Grandma's passing. She tried to fight. She did, but she was alone. No one believed her. Even your mom cut ties. Vivian, of course, she said her biggest regret wasn't losing the money. It was losing her voice, her place, her dignity. I clenched the steering wheel. She also said, Sloane paused, that the only way to win against Grandpa is to stop playing by his rules. I stared straight ahead, the truth sinking like a cold weight into my stomach. I had played by his rules for 36 years, and now it was time to rewrite the game. When we got home, Caleb was already half asleep again. I carried him in, tucked him under his dinosaur blanket, and kissed his forehead, for a brief moment watching his little chest rise and fall. I wondered if it was selfish to fight, if maybe I should just let them take care of everything, give him a future with private schools and legacy promises, even if it meant I'd be erased quietly in the background. But then I remembered the words from my father's mouth, once Caleb's designated as heir. She's irrelevant, not Elena, not my daughter, just she, like I was already a footnote. No, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Sloane was waiting at the kitchen table, her laptop open, a glass of water beside her, and a folder labeled Monroe Holdings, Draft Transfer Docs. She looked up as I entered, her tone matter of fact. I downloaded everything from Grayson's Google Drive. He's terrible with passwords. How do you even know how to do this? I asked, both horrified and impressed. She gave a dry smile. It's amazing what a teenager can learn when she doesn't trust her own family. I sat down beside her, brushing a hand through my hair. Okay. So, what now? We document, we organize. And then we bring in someone who doesn't owe Grandpa anything. You mean a lawyer? Sloane nodded. I asked Aunt Eleanor for a name, someone she worked with years ago when she tried to fight back. I stared at her, a mix of awe and guilt tightening my chest. You've done all this, while I was trying to win them back with casseroles and politeness. Sloane's voice softened. You were trying to protect us the only way you knew how. I was just watching from the outside. I touched her cheek. Not anymore. We fight together now. The next morning, I sat alone on the balcony with a cup of black coffee and a legal pad. I wasn't sure what I was writing. Maybe a timeline, maybe just thoughts, maybe a warning to my future self never to trust people who say it's just business when it's your life on the line. At 9:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, Elena Monroe. A confident woman's voice asked, Yes, this is Cassidy Blake. Eleanor Walsh gave me your contact. She said you're in a situation involving trust restructuring, unauthorized asset movement, and potential custody manipulation. Is that correct? I blinked. Yes, all of that. And probably more. Good. She said, Let's talk. Cassidy met us that afternoon at her office in a modest gray building downtown. Nothing flashy, but sharp and efficient, like her. She had short silver blonde hair, a crisp navy blazer, and a tone that didn't waste time. She motioned for us to sit and placed a yellow legal pad between us. Walk me through everything slowly. Start from the invitation. I did. I told her about the party, the speeches, the slideshow, the absence of my name and the family's vision of the future. Sloane took over when we reached the recordings. She explained what she found, what she downloaded, and what Eleanor had told her about the past. Cassidy nodded as she scribbled notes. First impression, she said, this is a classic pattern of generational control and strategic financial exclusion. Wealthy families often weaponize estate structures to keep problematic members silent or compliant. Problematic? I almost laughed. That's what I was to them now. I want to see the trust documents, Cassidy continued. You mentioned Grayson was working with the family accountant on amendments. If we can prove intent to remove you without formal notice, it's grounds for contest. And the custody issue I asked, Cassidy's expression hardened. More complicated, but we have leverage. If they've been psychologically conditioning Caleb, undermining your parenting, bribing him with legacy promises, that's parental alienation, and that plays very badly in court. I exhaled. I hadn't even thought about court. I don't want this to get ugly. I said. Cassidy raised an eyebrow. Elena, it's already ugly. You're just the last one to walk into the room. Later that night, back home, I sat in the dark living room while Sloane made cocoa for the both of us. You know what hurts the most, I said quietly. She didn't look back as she stirred the mugs. What? That I kept making excuses for them every time they left me out of a meeting. I told myself it was a mistake. When Dad said I was too emotional for finance, I thought maybe I was. When Grayson offered to handle my trust paperwork during the divorce, I actually thanked him. Sloane handed me a mug and sat down beside me. They trained you to believe you were less, she said, so you wouldn't notice when they took more. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a silent vow. They may have tried to erase me from the Monroe legacy, but I would rewrite the narrative, word for word. 3 days later, Cassidy sent over the preliminary strategy memo. It was 26 pages long, with sections titled Trust Structure Analysis, Patterns of Psychological Undermining Recommended Legal Safeguards, immediate there, in black and white, were the words I dreaded and needed to see all at once. Client is at high risk of financial exclusion, reputational gaslighting, and custodial manipulation via legacy consolidation tactics. In other words, they weren't just planning to erase me, they were planning to replace me with Caleb. That night, while Caleb played on the rug with his Lego spaceship, I watched him through the doorway with a sick feeling in my stomach. How many times had my father or Grayson said things to him that seemed harmless on the surface? Real Monroes build empires. Your mom's creative, but not everyone is built for leadership. You're the future, buddy. We've got big plans for you. They weren't just flattering him, they were reprogramming him. I sat on the edge of the couch as he clicked 2 blocks together. Hey, honey? Yeah, he didn't look up. Did Grandpa or Uncle Grayson ever talk to you about living with them or going to a special school? He nodded absently. They said if I stayed over more, I could go to Blackstone Prep. It's where Grayson went. They said I'd get a room bigger than our whole apartment. My throat tightened. Did they say anything about me? Caleb hesitated and then shrugged. Grandpa said, you were tired. That being a mom is a lot, and that sometimes dads and grandpas step in when moms are overwhelmed, tired, overwhelmed. That was the narrative now I forced a smile. Do you think I'm overwhelmed? He glanced at me. No, you just don't have as much money. It was a dagger, innocent, but still sharp. The next morning, I texted Cassidy, they're conditioning him. We need to stop it. Her response came quickly. I'll file for emergency custodial review and asset freeze today. Also recommending family therapist with expertise in alienation. By noon, she had submitted a formal request to the family court to place a temporary injunction on any property transfer or trust amendment involving Monroe assets pending investigation. She also sent a notice of objection to the Monroe family lawyer, someone I knew well. A man who had played golf with my father every Saturday since I was 8. He responded within an hour, his email oozing condescension. Surely there's been some misunderstanding. Elena, I'm confident we can resolve this quietly for everyone's sake. Quiet was their favorite weapon. Too bad I wasn't afraid of noise anymore. Sloane, meanwhile, was working like a private investigator. She had color-coded folders on our dining table, red for trust documents, blue for emails, yellow for family patterns, and green for Caleb-specific moments. She even dug up old voice notes she had secretly recorded of Grayson during car rides. You're lucky your mom's letting you come over. Some women get bitter after divorce. Caleb's gonna be a leader, just like me. Not all kids get that kind of chance. Those weren't just comments, they were planting ideas. I listened to them all, again and again, and then I cried not just because of the betrayal, but because my daughter had caught what I'd been too broken to see. One afternoon, Cassidy called. Her voice was tight. They filed for an emergency custody hearing. Grayson and your father, what they can't. Grayson isn't even his parent. They're claiming de facto custodial interest, that you've been unstable since the divorce, and that Caleb is already spending more time in their care by his own choice. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, my knees weak. But that's not true. They manipulated him. I know, she said calmly, and we're going to prove it. But you need to be ready. They're going to attack everything you're parenting, your career, your finances. I work 2 jobs. I've never missed a custody drop off. I've never, Elena. Her voice cut through my panic. You don't need to prove you're perfect. You just need to prove you've been manipulated. That's where your daughter comes in, that evening. I sat down with Sloan and told her everything about the custody petition, the hearing date, the fact that Grandpa and Grayson were trying to legally take her brother using twisted logic and family money. Sloan didn't flinch. We'll beat them. She walked to her room and returned with a notebook she had been keeping privately. Everything they ever said to Caleb that felt wrong, I wrote it down. Dates, context, who was present. I even recorded one of Grandpa's phone calls with Uncle Grayson last month when they thought I was asleep in the living room. She handed it to me. I flipped through the pages and felt a lump rise in my throat. She had done the one thing I hadn't thought to do. She documented truth before they could erase it. I hugged her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like the mother I used to be, not desperate, not scared, just certain. This wasn't just about money or trust funds or estates. This was about my children's identity, and I would fight for it with everything I had. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and stale air conditioning. I sat on the bench outside courtroom 3B, clutching a manila folder full of documents, printouts, and screenshots. Sloan was next to me, calm on the surface, but with her fingers drumming rhythmically on her thigh. She had dressed herself in a navy blazer and jeans, her idea of professional teenage armor. Across the hallway sat Grayson, flanked by our father, Howard Monroe, and their lawyer, Mr. Kessler, the same one who used to sneak me mints during long board meetings when I was still CFO. Now he wouldn't even look at me. They all looked polished, united, prepped. Grayson smirked once when our eyes met. Not cruel, just confident, like he already knew how this would end. Cassidy arrived precisely at 8:59 a.m., hair pinned back, file in hand, phone already recording timestamp notes. She nodded at me. Ready, no, I whispered, but we're doing it anyway. The judge was a woman in her 60s, calm, measured, with sharp eyes and a voice that left no room for nonsense. That helped. I had feared someone younger, someone more easily dazzled by the Monroe name. Grayson's side opened the hearing with an argument centered around family stability, educational opportunity, and legacy planning. They spoke as though Caleb were a company asset. His emotional well-being boiled down to spreadsheets and college preparatory charts. Mr. Kessler even called my parenting style volatile and emotionally inconsistent. Cassidy stood, unbothered. Your Honor, my client is not here to defend perfection, only truth. We contend that this petition is not about Caleb's best interest, but about a generational pattern of manipulation, financial coercion, and parental alienation. The judge raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation. Cassidy didn't flinch. We're prepared to substantiate every word. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, palms slick. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as I spoke. I've made mistakes, I said. I've worked late nights, I've missed recitals, I've cried in front of my children, but I've never once made them feel like they were less important than money, status, or name. I raised my daughter to think critically, and she noticed when something was wrong before I did. My son is 8. He doesn't understand that the people showering him with praise and gifts are doing it to win him away from his mother. That's not legacy, that's grooming. The room went still. Grayson shifted uncomfortably. Howard stared at me like I'd betrayed a blood oath. But I wasn't finished. I have recordings, documentation, and a teenager brave enough to tell the truth. Cassidy called Sloan to the stand. The judge hesitated. Is this necessary? It is. Cassidy said, Miss Monroe is not just a witness. She's the reason we're all here. Sloan stood with composure that made my heart ache with pride. She recounted the party, the documents she found, the comments Grandpa and Uncle Grayson made to Caleb over the past year, the voice recordings. Cassidy played a short excerpt. If your mom really loved you, she'd want what's best even if that means stepping aside. That was Howard's voice. Clear, cold, documented. The judge scribbled something quickly. After the lunch break, the judge called both parties into chambers, no audience, no lawyers, just me, Grayson, our father, and her. She looked us over carefully. Mr. Monroe, she said to my father, you are not Caleb's legal guardian, nor are you his parent. You are a grandfather, a powerful one, yes, but that does not grant you authority to reshape custodial boundaries by proxy. He started to speak, but she silenced him with a look. To petition for custodial change based on reputation and social standing is not only inappropriate, it's offensive. This court will not serve as a tool for dynastic succession. Then she turned to Grayson. You have no standing in this case. This is between parents, not uncles trying to inherit control. She turned to me last. Ms. Monroe, your daughter may have saved this boy from something he doesn't yet understand, and she may have saved you, too. The judge dismissed the case, no changes to custody, no property realignment, and she issued a temporary protection order preventing further contact between Caleb and any Monroe family member unless I gave written consent. The walk out of the courtroom felt like shedding invisible chains. Howard didn't look at me as we passed each other in the hallway. Grayson muttered something under his breath, but Cassidy caught it. If he contacts you again, she said calmly, we file for full no contact. I nodded, let them simmer. That night, Caleb climbed into bed beside me while I read emails. Mom, he asked, yeah, am I in trouble? I turned to him, heartbreaking. Of course not. Why would you think that? He stared at the ceiling. Because everyone was mad in that room today. I thought maybe it was my fault. I hugged him tight. No, baby, it was never your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're just a kid. A smart, kind, loving kid. And we're going to be okay. He rested his head on my shoulder. Even without Grandpa's money, he asked. I kissed his forehead, especially without it. The morning after the hearing, I woke up to silence. Not the tense, waiting to be shattered kind of silence I'd grown used to living under the Monroe shadow. This was different. It was calm, earned. Caleb was still asleep, curled against a pillow shaped like a starship. Sloan was already in the kitchen, hair tied up, reviewing her spreadsheet of post-defense action items like a junior partner in a law firm. I poured coffee and stood beside her, looking at the laptop. You're still tracking everything. She nodded without looking up. We still need to monitor Grandpa. If they try to refile or touch the trust again, we want to be ready. There it was, that inherited Monroe vigilance. But this time, it belonged to a girl who used it to protect, not manipulate. I thought maybe we could take a break, I said gently. She smiled faintly. We will, just not today. Later that afternoon, Cassidy called. They backed off. She reported, no counterfilings, no motions. My guess they're regrouping. Should I be worried? Not yet. Grayson's reputation took a hit. No one wants to be caught fighting for control of an 8-year-old on court record, especially with recordings floating around. And my father Cassidy hesitated. He's quiet, but don't mistake that for surrender. He's the kind of man who doesn't like being told no, especially not by a woman, especially not his daughter. I leaned against the kitchen counter, nodding slowly. Let him be mad. I said, he's not my compass anymore. It was Sloane's idea to write the letter, not to Grandpa or Grayson, but to me. She handed it to me one evening, folded inside one of Caleb's old drawings. It's not long, she said, but I wanted to say it without you interrupting. I unfolded the page. Her handwriting was precise and dark. Mom, I know the last few years have made you question everything your choices, your strength, your place in this family, but I never questioned you, not once. When they ignored you, I saw you stay kind. When they tried to buy Caleb's loyalty, I saw you hold on to love. And when I told you the truth, you didn't flinch. You listened. You fought for us without screaming. You defended us without needing applause. You were never erased. Mom, you just hadn't taken the pen back yet. Love, always. Sloan, I cried harder reading that letter than I did during the hearing, because for the first time in years I felt seen not by strangers, not by lawyers or judges, but by my daughter, by the person I'd raised with all the broken parts of me. And she turned out whole anyway. We started making small changes. I converted the second bedroom into an art meets study space for Sloan and Caleb, replacing the bland furniture with thrifted bookshelves and bright colors. I updated my resume and started applying to creative finance roles, jobs that valued flexibility, not just pedigree. We went out for tacos on Tuesday nights just because we laughed more, we argued less. Caleb stopped asking about the Monroe estate. He started asking about Mars rovers and comic books again. A week later, I got a package, no return address, inside a hardbound book of Monroe family photos, one of the original heirloom albums, and a yellow sticky note on the inside cover. They edited you out of the new archives. I thought you should have this before it disappears too. L.W. L.W. Logan Walsh, Eleanor's son, my cousin, the quiet one who'd always watched from the corner of reunions, who worked an account in and never spoke unless spoken to. I flipped through the album, stunned. There I was, 18 years old, valedictorian speech in hand, 26 holding baby Sloan. 29 standing next to Ryan at my promotion ceremony. They were all gone from the digital version I saw at the party, but Logan had preserved them, had mailed them to me in secret, proof that I was there, that I belonged, that I mattered. That weekend, Sloan invited Eleanor and Logan over for dinner. It was awkward at first, as most family reconnections are, but it softened over shared stories and wine. Eleanor watched Caleb draw spaceships with Logan on the floor and turned to me. You know, she said, your father once said you were the most dangerous of all his children. I blinked. What? She smiled. Because you didn't rebel. You listened. You followed. And he thought he'd won. But that kind of daughter, the quiet ones who still think for themselves, they're the ones who eventually leave and never come back. I didn't answer, but I knew she was right. That night, I stood on the balcony and watched the city lights flicker like stars beneath a glass sky. Sloan joined me. Do you think he'll come after us again? She asked. I took a deep breath. I think. He might, but next time we won't be caught off guard. She nodded. Next time, she said, we write the script before they try to cast us out. I smiled because we already were. It started with a phone call I didn't recognize. The number was blocked, but something in my gut told me to answer. Elena, the voice said, calm, clipped, controlled. Howard Monroe, my father. I'd like to speak. In person. No, I replied instantly, heart pounding. You owe me that much. He said, I gave you everything. I almost laughed. You tried to take everything. You misunderstand. He said, this has all been miscommunicated. It's not too late to fix things. I'm not interested in fixing anything that means becoming invisible again. There was silence on the line. Then he said something I didn't expect. Then I'll go public. I met Cassidy that afternoon at her office, her legal pad already filling with scribbles as I recounted the call. He said if I didn't meet him, he'd release a statement to the board, the press, everyone about me being unstable, emotionally compromised. He says he has letters from my divorce attorney, selective therapy notes, old financial records he's ready to leak. Cassidy didn't blink. Classic preemptive character assassination. It's how patriarchs make sure no one listens to daughters who step out of line. What do? We beat him to it, she said. We tell the story first on our terms. The next day, Sloan and I recorded a video. Just the two of us. No polish, no glamour. One take, one truth. She sat next to me, her hand over mine as I looked into the camera. My name is Elena Monroe, I said, and I used to believe that silence was strength. that enduring things quietly made you noble, that being erased by your family was just the cost of being too different, too emotional, too female. Sloane leaned in slightly. But we've learned that silence only helps people who already have power. We laid it all out, not just the trust betrayal or the custody attack, but the culture that allowed it to fester, the pressure to obey, the erasure of lineage when it didn't serve legacy. We didn't name names, but everyone knew, and within 24 hours, it had 280,000 views. 2 days later, a journalist from a national outlet contacted me. A woman named Carmen Reyes, an investigative reporter who had followed Monroe Holdings for years. She had seen the video, and she wanted to dig deeper. I've received anonymous tips before about questionable restructuring at Monroe. She said, "Your story connects the personal with the systemic." I hesitated. This wasn't meant to go viral. It was just, for us, exactly. She said, "That's what makes it powerful. Let the truth grow legs." With Cassidy's guidance, we shared curated documents, redacted emails, audio snippets, confirmation of procedural violations during the trust edits. And just like that, the story stopped being a family drama. It became a case study in generational financial coercion. Howard panicked. First came the PR statement from Monroe Holdings, full of legalese and lukewarm concern. The Monroe family deeply values privacy and refutes any allegations that compromise our commitment to ethical legacy planning. Then came the subpoena he tried to sue me for defamation. Cassidy responded with a smile and a 73-page counterclaim, including evidence of slander, custodial interference, breach of fiduciary duty, and unlawful trust restructuring. We also subpoenaed Grayson's digital records. And that's when the cracks turned into a collapse. Logan Walsh, Eleanor's son, came forward publicly with screenshots, internal memos, meeting logs. He had watched in silence for years from inside the finance team, and now, finally, he spoke. I watched my aunt be discredited. I watched my cousin be pushed out. I watched my bosses prioritize bloodline over competence. Enough. Within days, the board of Monroe Holdings issued a temporary suspension of both Grayson and Howard pending internal investigation. They also began reviewing the trust itself to determine if undue influence and family coercion had played a role in how it was amended over the past decade. It had. When the news broke, I didn't feel joy. Not yet. I felt disbelief, exhaustion, relief tinged with grief. For the version of me that spent years trying to be enough, for the years I let their rules define my role, for the little girl who sat at a walnut boardroom table with her father and colored quietly while he negotiated millions, never realizing she was being trained to behave, not to lead. It took Caleb a while to understand why the phone stopped ringing, why Grandpa didn't pick him up that weekend, why Uncle Grayson's voice disappeared from his messages. We took him to therapy someone Cassidy recommended, a woman who helped him sort through what was real love and what was performance. One afternoon, after a session, Caleb came into the living room and sat beside me. Quiet, I thought they liked me more than Sloane. He said, "I didn't know it was because I was a boy." Tears blurred my eyes. I pulled him close. "It's not your job to carry their expectations," I said. "You're allowed to just be a kid." He nodded slowly. "I like it better here. It's lighter." That night, he drew a picture of our little apartment. He titled it My Real House. A week later, I got a letter, certified mail, from my father, not legal, not aggressive, just a letter inside, 3 lines written in perfect cursive. "You didn't have to burn it down. You could have come home quietly. You're still my daughter even if you don't want to be." I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and never responded, because I had come home, just not to his definition of one. It's strange how life continues after a storm, not with fanfare, but with quiet. No one knocks on your door with a medal when you survive emotional warfare. No one throws a party because you chose peace over legacy. But there are signs, small ones, like Caleb no longer flinching when the phone rings, like Sloane humming while brushing her teeth, like waking up and realizing I haven't had a stress dream in a week. One afternoon, Sloane came home from school glowing. "I got in," she said, slapping a thick envelope on the counter. "The journalism mentorship, top 3 out of 70 applicants." I wrapped her in a hug before she could say more. You earned every bit of this. She grinned. You know why, I applied. Because you're brilliant. Well, yes. She winked. But also because I saw you speak truth even when it wasn't convenient. And I thought, if my mom can say it, maybe I can write it. She paused. I want to tell stories that make people think twice before they erase someone. My eyes welled. Then you're already doing the work. A few days later, I received an invitation. A woman named Margot Linton, chair of a nonprofit called Daughters Forward, had seen the video Sloan and I recorded. She invited me to speak at their annual summit, a gathering of women disinherited, discredited, or disowned for refusing to conform. I nearly declined. I'm not a speaker. I told Cassidy, I'm just a mother who got tired. Cassidy raised an eyebrow. Exactly. That's the point. I said yes. The event was held in an old converted library downtown. Wooden beams, glass ceilings, light pouring in like a benediction. I stood at the podium, heart pounding, looking out at a sea of women, some in suits, some in jeans, some holding babies on their laps. My name is Elena Monroe, I began, and I used to think silence was survival. I told them about the party, about the whisper, about the car ride and Sloane's voice slicing through illusion like a scalpel. I told them what happened when I stopped asking for permission, and when I finished, there was no roaring applause. Just the sound of women standing up, one by one, in a complete silence. That moment held more power than any inheritance ever could. After the summit, Eleanor took me out for tea. We sat in the garden of a quiet cafe, watching sparrows hop between flower pots. You were brave, she said. I was late, I replied. No, she corrected gently. You were on time for the part that mattered most. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a single photo me at 16, sitting at the Monroe Summer Estate, holding a sketch pad. I kept this, she said, because I always knew one day you'd need to see the version of yourself before they tried to reshape you. I stared at the photo for a long time, not because it was flattering, it wasn't, but because I remembered who that girl was before she had learned to perform, and suddenly I missed her. That night, I took out Sloane's letter again, the one she wrote after the custody hearing. I reread the last line. You were never erased. Mom, you just hadn't taken the pen back yet. So I opened my laptop, created a new folder, named it The Pen is Mine, and I started to write, not for anyone else, not to prove anything, just for me. A week later, Caleb handed me a crayon drawing. It was a picture of three stick figures in a living room. One had big glasses, clearly me. One had long hair, Sloane. One was flying in a cape, Caleb. Of course, at the bottom, in shaky second grade handwriting, it said, Our family is strong. I bent down. Why are you flying? He giggled. Because you said I didn't have to carry their weight, so now I can go anywhere. I hugged him tight, heart full. He didn't need legacy, he had freedom. Grayson eventually tried to contact me, a sterile email with vague apologies, claiming he was pressured by Dad, that he never meant harm. I didn't respond, not out of bitterness, but because I had finally understood closure isn't something you wait for from people who hurt you. It's something you build for yourself, one boundary, one choice, one free breath at a time, and I had already closed that chapter. Spring came early that year. The air felt warmer than usual, like the world itself was trying to move on. The cherry blossoms outside our apartment bloomed in soft pink explosions, and every time I looked at them, I thought they never asked permission to be seen. I was still adjusting to the quiet, no emergency court notices, no Monroe drama, just life. And in that stillness, I started dreaming again. One morning, Sloane found me on the floor surrounded by paint samples and index cards. What are you doing? She asked. Amused. Planning, I replied. For what, the revolution, maybe, I laughed. Or maybe just our next chapter. Because after everything, I had realized something important. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life proving I could fight. I wanted to build. I'd always loved design, not just finance. I used to doodle floor plans in the margins of meeting agendas, sketch office spaces that felt like home. Imagine places that made people breathe easier just by walking in. So I applied for a grant, a small one, to start a design studio focused on trauma informed spaces, especially for single moms, transitional housing, and domestic recovery centers. I called it Second Light Studio. The tagline, "You deserve a room that remembers you're human." When the first project was greenlit, a shelter reading room makeover, I walked through the empty space with Sloan and Caleb. "It's kind of gray," Caleb said. "Exactly." I smiled. "That's why we're going to change it." Sloan held up a swatchboard. "Turquoise orange both." Caleb beamed. "Can we put a rocket mural? You read my mind. We painted. We hammered. We laughed." It wasn't glamorous and it wasn't profitable, not yet, but it was ours, and it made people feel safe, which was more than my last name ever did. I never went back to the Monroe estate, but sometimes, when I passed certain parts of the city, I'd see the ripple of our story, a comment on a podcast, a line in a speech, an article footnote about financial estrangement and intergenerational control, and I'd smile, not because they remembered my name, but because they remembered the lesson. That love doesn't require obedience. That family isn't defined by inheritance. That silence is not strength, but choices. One Sunday afternoon, we were sitting on the grass in a city park, just me, Sloan, and Caleb. The air smelled like cotton candy and new leaves. Out of nowhere, Sloan said, "I don't think I ever said thank you." For what? For listening that night at the party, for not brushing me off, for trusting me when I couldn't explain. I turned to her. "I trusted you because you sounded like someone who'd finally seen the truth, and because I think, deep down, I was waiting for someone to tell me it was okay to leave. You didn't need permission," she whispered. "I know that now." Then Caleb, who had been munching quietly on kettle corn, piped up, "I'm glad we left." I smiled. "Me too." He paused. "Do you think they miss us?" I didn't answer right away. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But that wasn't the point. So I said, "I think the people who really see us, they're sitting right here." He nodded, satisfied. That night, back home. I stood in the hallway looking at the wall we'd turned into a gallery. There was the photo from Eleanor teenage me with wild hair and ink on my jeans. There was the drawing Caleb made our family, capes and all. And right in the middle, a new framed print we just hung. We didn't lose the family. We found the ones who never left. I touched the frame gently, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I had to earn belonging. I was the foundation now, and that was enough.